Okay, welcome. How many attendees do we have right now? 12. Waiting for another minute and then we'll start. Okay, welcome. Sound check. Everybody can hear me clearly?
Yep,
Okay, thanks. Excellent.
you're here.
Okay. For today, one single item, discussion on lame. Kind of, I want, well, maybe first asking for the attendees. Any other comments on the agenda? So I think it was clear in the announcement of this meeting. Um, we want to follow up on the discussions on the mailing list, on different different threads on the mailing list. Um, discuss the different alternatives and come to a conclusion and send that back to the mailing list as how we go forward with the document. I prepared a number of slides. I will go through them and then slide by slide later we can discuss what we think and what options we prefer as a working group. Excuses. Right, here we go. This is an ITF meeting. The chairs, myself, Tim, and Suzanne. Warren is the area director. We have a Jabber room, Zulip. It's also from part of Meet Echo, and the minutes will be published also later. And if somebody wants to take minutes, please follow this link and do it right away. Otherwise, Suzanne, Tim, and I will go over the recording and make the minutes and publish them. Right, the note well, everybody is aware of the note well as the ITF meeting. The code of conduct, be nice to each other. That's something we take serious. These are the meeting tips. Well, these are also for the in-person meeting tips. We're now all remote, so I think that's we're on it's a level playing field today. This is the agenda. It's on the RFC 8499 bis document, DNS terminology, and we want to finish the definition of lame, the lame delegation, because we want to go forward with the document, and certainly the authors want to finish that work. Good. We had an already existing definition from lame from the RFC 8499. We were during the working group last call. There was a discussion was start, or a question was actually asked, um, what lame delegation exactly meant, and if that the definition on the mailing list was similar to the current terminology. Um, quite a discussion started. The working group's chairs thought, well, if there are certain ideas, certain definitions seems to converge, let's include that in the document, and then we go for a second working group last call. But then again, the whole discussion, not derailed, started again. So also the simpler definition. This is what longer definition. Uh, so there was a lot of different interpretations of lame delegation. So that's why we are here now. We want to, with this interim meeting, we want to discuss the different definitions. In the meantime, also certain participants, participants have indicated that if it gives that much confusion, lame delegation, maybe we should go away from that and come up with better definitions. Okay. So these are all the options. So this is the existing definition from 8499. I won't repeat it, so everybody can read it. I want to, well, Paul, please go ahead.
Hi, this is Paul Hoffman. Benno, I wanted to correct one thing that you just said.
Yeah.
Or if not correct, get clarification.
Yeah.
You said there was discussion on the list and some people weren't so happy with it and such. And so they wanted to create a new definition. I got this strong feeling that what in fact was desired was people wanted to create new terms.
That's true. Yeah.
Which is different than a new definition. So I think we have
You're right.
At least two choices of what's going on here. One is, do we, and again, the current document that's not here, you have 8499. The current document ends with, these early definitions do not match the current use of the term lame delegation, but there is not consensus on what a lame delegation is. So either we can say there is consensus, or here is the current one, or we can make up new terms. Personally, I would prefer not to make up new terms. The terminology document, when we've done that in the last year or two, hasn't been really successful.
Nope.
But if that's the only way to move forwards, of course, we will. So thank you.
Thanks. So, thank you. So so part of your comment is also in the slides, but thanks for this clarification. So here we are. So these are the three kind of discussions on the mailing list. This is my own summary. So it's existing definition and a note, as Paul just said. So it's not clear. It's not the definition. Make it historic, because it's not, because also there's much confusion going on. And that's how it all started. Find rough consensus on the definition of meaning of lame delegation, not on the terms, because that's something we want to exclude in the discussion, or I come to that to the next slide. So going over these different options here. So I just shared the current definition of the current text in the document, the 8499, and the BIS adds actually these early definitions do not match current use of lame delegation. But there's no consensus on what a lame delegation is. And that's in the current BIS 07 version document. Optionally, and that's for discussion, if people feel for different reasons, say, well, we can't use the definition anymore because it's too ambiguous. People have so many different interpretations. We shouldn't use it anymore. We can mark it as historic. And for different reasons, I put also the discriminatory language that's also on the mailing list. And I'm not a native speaker, so I also have an more dictionary interpretation of lame. It was a lame party or a lame proposal, but there are other interpretations of that also. But maybe let's stick to the more technical things. And there have been quite some confusion, quite some discussion about the term lame. Being not very clear, defined, and people have different interpretations. And I want to add this: if the working group identifies the need to propose new terms, as Paul already said, to replace lame delegation, then the chairs suggest we should go. This shouldn't be part of this BIS document. But people who want to spend time and energy on this write another document to go to define this, because we really want to focus on finishing this document and not adding another iteration of new, starting to define new terms, because that will take another half year of a year. So these are the two alternatives. We stick with the current definition. Currently, we have a note, or we say, well, with this note, we also say we mark it as historic because, etc., etc. So, Edward, do you allow me to go to one slide further and then we start a discussion? I think then I'm done with kind of introducing the problem and setting the scene, and then we go for. You're okay, or you have a question on this specific slide? Yeah.
No, finish.
Okay,
I have
thanks.
a question about the discussion.
Okay, so, or if we find we need lame delegation as defined, can we find rough consensus on the meaning of lame as we have discussed it on the mailing list? This definition, a lame delegation is said, well, quote here, with the quotes open, lame delegation is said to exist with one or more authoritative, etc. This definition found quite some support on the mailing list. Okay, so these are the three alternatives, so to say. Well, one is two alternatives with different taste, and two is really a different alternative. And so, and indeed, it's a definition document terms. It's to be clear that we want to find rough consensus, not a perfect answer, but we also want to finish the document. Did I set our expectations clear, Suzanne? Do I need to add something before we start the discussion?
Took me a second to get off of mute. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, that sounds right. We are just trying to find a path forward that's acceptable regarding how we manage the existing term and how we find consensus among the various opinions people have.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks.
And we figured that having a meeting where we could converse might get us to that quicker. So thanks for being here, you guys, and let's go.
Yeah, certainly. Edward, please go ahead. I will go to this slide. Maybe you have some questions on this, on these alternatives.
Is there a current use of the term? I just realized today that this is about the terminology document.
Yeah.
So historically, what's in the document is what I'm used to from 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So the question I have is there a current use of the term now that's causing confusion, or is this really about what happened, only about this document? Is there another document? That's what I missed.
So yeah, so the question was on the mailing list because they used the term not for an IETF document, but I think for an ICANN document. Not sure. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But so someone asked for kind of support or agreement with, well, is this a correct interpretation of the term? But because it's being used in another context or not context, other group in other gremia, the ICANN. And so Paul, one sentence. And just recently, there was this document by Peter Thomason on CDS. I have to put it correctly here. One moment. It's on the CDS, and C-Sync discussion. Where there is also the term lame delegation is being used. And Wes Hardaker also asked, well, what do you mean with lame also for these situations? And then there's some discussion about how name servers are not responding or in a certain way responding. So again, here the term lame didn't fulfill its task. Let's put it that way. It again created confusion. Yeah, maybe Paul, please go ahead, and then Suzanne, or
sure.
Yeah.
So it is used in, Benno, you just covered three different large contexts. One is it is used in our own documents, and it has been used without questioning what kind of lame are you talking about, given that there's two actually in 8499. But certainly as the discussion of CDNS, CD-Sync, all of those are coming up, it will come up in our documents. The second context where it is used is outside, and I don't think ICANN is special here, but there are groups that are trying to help authoritative administrators do the right thing, which will often be don't be lame. And therefore, we need to have either we need to have a definition for that, or we need to not have a definition for it so that they can make up their own. And then the third context, which I think is also pretty significant, is it appears in the documentation for different authoritative servers. And I suspect if it's in the documentation, it's also in the code where they are looking for things or such like that. So that one's going to be the hardest to get at. But I do think, to answer Ed's question, yeah, it is used in many places, not as definitively, because since this is a negative thing and something that isn't supposed to happen, but it is used in many places. And now we know, especially from the current discussion, that it is, that people even within our context don't agree on what it is. So we should either make a good run at it or say, stop talking about this term, it's historic, something like that. Thanks.
Yep. It's a good summary. Thanks, Paul. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to remind Ed Lewis of an effort that was undertaken at Aaron many years ago to have a policy about lame delegations for inatter.arpa. And he probably remembers even more vividly than I do, pretty much the same discussion about what exactly did the term mean and how would you know. And it's just as confused now as it was then. So I think we're in. I don't think we need fear that it's expired from the lexicon. I don't think anybody's ever known exactly what it means or agreed upon a definition. And this is not going to be the first or last time that we take something that has multiple or ambiguous definitions and put it in the terminology document. And since I called him out, I think I see Ed's hand up.
Yeah. And okay. Yeah, please. I will comment on Paul Wouter's comment on Julep on Jabber later. Yeah. Or you can also ask the question yourself, Paul Wouters, if you want. Okay. Edward, please.
Suzanne, yeah, I did all that work, and the only reason I'm bringing that up is that's what I say 20 years ago. I mean, now it's no longer relevant to anything we're actually doing. But yeah, that was my 20-year ago experience with it. And if you want to leave the definition to what that was 20 years ago, then it's historic. That's all I wanted to throw in there for that.
Yes, thank you.
Paul, please go ahead. Paul Wouters.
Hi. Sorry. So, yeah, my proposal, which I think is sort of sent to the list as well in the past, is that to avoid the word lame, call it out as historic, and make a word that sort of fixes that encompasses everything. So my suggestion, for example, is like flawed delegation, where you sort of leave in the middle whether what exactly the flaw is, whether it's the RR sets are inconsistent and or the IP is not reachable or there's no name server listening on the port. Because I think in most times when people in the past talked about lame delegation, they just meant like there's an inconsistency problem between the parent and the child name servers right now, and that's sort of covers all of that. So that would be my suggestion. I think doing a separate document for just the term lame would be like not very helpful to the idea.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, sorry. Agree it's in the sense that not only for lame, but if people think, well, I was thinking of more, again, personally here, a set of definitions, because lame is actually more specific than many people use it. So at least if I read the mailing list correctly. So lame, people think lame is also a non-responsive, maybe not only incorrect configured name server, but also non-responsive. So you don't hear anything. A serve fail also being considered lame.
So I think
So
there was actually a discussion in between there, right? Whether that was included or not. So
Yeah,
that's where I think there's no consistency on
no.
what multiple people called lame. So that's why I was moving towards like flawed and then on purpose including all kinds of failures.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that, but then we're clear about what we that we mean kind of a superset and not a very specific set of incorrect configuration. That could also be a solution here. But again, indeed, how is the current word lame used in different documents, or not? Well, in current documents, we don't go back to the so. And would many times flawed name service be, as a new term, sufficient? Or, and that was actually why I, the chair suggested, if we really need more terms to specify the different, failure modes or failures of an authoritative name server, if we need that, that would be maybe 3 or 4 new definitions. And again, do we need another document for that? Or, but for sure, we want to finish the current document. So if there's an easy or a simple definition we can agree upon, and that's kind of the superset of flawed name servers or incorrect name servers, that would also be a solution. Thank you, Paul Wouters. Paul Hoffman, please.
Paul Wouters just went with this, which is to do 2 things at once. Declare the term lame delegation historic, so that everyone who's used it in the past is on record for saying you didn't know exactly how you were using it, and it prevents current documents that are not or documents that are not yet finished. That prevents them from using that. Then saying a better term might have been, not to say we are defining this term, but a better term might have been, and I forget which one he called, flawed delegation, which could include things such as A, B, C, D, and Don Eastlake came up with another one on the chat, which was in fact correct as well. And so simply to say we are not defining this new one, but essentially saying to future documents, if you want to talk about what some people used to think of as lame, you can call it a flawed delegation. It doesn't have a standardized definition, and then you state what you want for that, and it might be all of them, it might be a subset of them, or whatever. But if we say could be thought of as a flawed delegation, which might have some or all of these things, I think that helps the definition, and it helps clarify that it's not that we are saying the earlier definitions became unreal at a certain date. Just saying it's historic, they're gone.
Yeah. Thanks for your input. I'm monitoring the Jabber room. So there's no, let's see.
I keep losing the chat window. I guess, I'm not seeing anybody ahead of me. So Paul Hoffman, clarifying question. What you're suggesting is rather than prescriptively redefine or prescriptively adding a new term, you're suggesting that we sort of suggest one.
Suggest a new term that somebody in the future might use for their needs, and give some parameters of what might be in it, is the way I understood Paul Wouters. And I think that sounds reasonable, given that we know that there are some strong disagreements about what people today are saying when they mean lame.
Yeah, that does get does get away from the problem of being overly prescriptive. What if
Yeah,
what
and
if
so
that's
like
figured out?
Ed said that he proposed a few terms. I don't think we want, I think even having one new term as the replacement is overly prescriptive. I think suggesting stuff might be better here. Could be, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Ed, I just read your email before the start of the meeting. But also the new terms or the new definitions use terms that we also made historic, actually. So bailiwick, we also made historic in the current draft. Okay. Sorry, I will go back to the other perspective. Somebody raised hand. Yeah, Dwayne, please go ahead.
Am I coming through? Oh,
yeah.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, cool. I guess I'm a little bit confused about the suggestion or the idea of suggesting terminology but not defining a terminology. I mean, it feels to me like that's kind of how we ended up here in the first place. We have a term that people use that's not properly defined. I mean, wouldn't it be better to come up with, good definitions, if not necessarily in the next revision of this document, but in maybe some future terminology document? I guess I just want to know more about this idea of suggested terminology rather than defined terminology.
Yeah. So So my interpretation here was that. Yeah. Okay. So suggested terminology. So my interpretation of flawed delegation, what's now proposed, is that it includes actually any misconfiguration or misbehavior. It's kind of a superset, but I don't know, is that a good definition or not, or sufficient clear? And I think Paul also mentions, well, it's up to the user of the flaw delegation in the document to specify, well, to use it more specifically. Is that correct, Paul Hoffman?
Yes. So, and we're sort of wordsmithing on the fly here, but yes, it wouldn't say a replacement is this. It would be, you can use a term like this that might have these meanings. I agree with Dwayne. That's not the optimal solution. But I also think it's better than, for example, just marking it historic without any reflection on the fact that some of the problems that we saw on the mailing list were a superset. And then also certainly not wanting to go back into let's pull up bailiwick again. We don't want to do that. And so I like suggestions like that, I think are mostly a waste of time, because we know we can go round and round.
Yeah.
And the question is, can we go forwards well enough to help people in the future? If not, then I would say I would be more towards marking it historic and just walking away. But we do have some information. The working group has some information I think we can give to the world about these thoughts. So I don't know if that makes Dwayne happier or not.
Well, in a way, no, because like, to give some specific examples from the current discussion, there was no consensus on whether lame delegation could be applied to a name server that doesn't even respond.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I don't see how like okay, so let's say we call it a flawed delegation. We still have that problem. We don't know if you can apply that to a non-responsive name server or a name server whose name doesn't exist. So I'm not sure that it solves all of the consensus problems we had with lame delegation.
It doesn't, but it allows somebody who's writing something in the future to have an idea of what they should or should not say. So, for example, and unfortunately, I think we're about to hit this over in Deprive, is that some people would say non-responsive means this, and some people would say no, non-responsive doesn't mean that. But it's it at least brings it into the discussion for them. A later document might say, look, 4 people started this after 8499 bis, and they all agreed on such and such. Let's make a name for it, or not.
Okay, I'll let someone else go.
Okay. Yeah.
Let me, am I jumping in front of anybody? Okay, let me sort of suggest what I think I'm hearing here, and people can tell me if I'm misunderstanding. Another option, and this would involve writing probably about a full paragraph as additional text on on the definition of lame delegation, which feels sort of, yeah, that feels like a lot, but at the same time, it could be useful and provide a longer discussion of the term. The substitute terms I'm hearing here are all very descriptive, so we don't have to propose them as terms. We just say, these are some of the situations that this generic and incompletely defined term are used to describe. We think we think people should not use lame delegation. We can call it historic and whatever words seem appropriately non-prescriptive, and then just say, we suggest people say what they mean. Because I'm looking at these terms and they're very descriptive, the suggested new terms, and they don't have to be in there. I think there's a couple of other entries in 8499 that do that catalog multiple meanings of a term in a descriptive way. Multiple uses of a term is probably a better way to put it, in a descriptive way, and has something very minimal as the prescriptive part. So if that, it sounds like and I have to apologize to Benno for introducing another option. But if people don't want to leave it alone, that might be the best way of capturing the major concerns. And before you ask, Benno, with vengeance upon me, yes, I'm happy to contribute to text.
Excellent.
Or review or any of that, because it seems to me we should be able to write something that's almost completely descriptive, but that covers pretty much everything we've been talking about here.
Yeah. So okay. So for my understanding, we add a paragraph, but that we add that to the historic lame definition, explaining.
Yeah, because people use the term and they're going to look for it in the document.
They will look for it. That makes sense. Yeah.
And I assume it's in the index.
And then we give advice,
and
directions
then we just say,
to
wherever
the reader.
you found this term, then we say, wherever you found this term, it's historic, it's not precise.
Yeah.
These are some of the cases it seems to be meant to cover, and it's probably better to say exactly what you mean.
Yeah. I see thumbs up from in the Jabber room.
Yeah, and now I will go back on mute and other people can comment on that.
Thank you for your contribution. Ed, you have your hand raised. Please go ahead.
There's so going back to my original question, and also Dwayne, I want to back what Dwayne said. There's so many ways a delegation can be broken, and I don't think we're going to have one term to cover it all. And so I think it's best to say a lame delegation, at least a term that I know the way it appears in the document here, that applies to something 20 years ago. We don't even talk about that anymore, except in history, right? So I don't think you need to replace that. We don't have a discussion anymore. So when someone else comes along with a document in any venue anywhere, it's really good if they have a really descriptive description of what they're trying to talk about, right? I don't think we can anticipate all the possible ways you can see a delegation is being broken. I mean, delegation from parent to child. There's so many ways it could break, and we probably should just advise people to be more clear, more specific about what it is they're worrying about. And then if there is something that needs to be discussed, give it a term at that point, or they can define a term there. I don't think that it's possible to anticipate a generic, there's something wrong here, a situation. Like all my suggestions, we're assuming that we're only talking about one or two different issues out there, but if it's just a wide open area, I think that you're not going to have a replacement. And I think the lame delegation as it appears in the terminology document, that applies to something that was specific to me a long time ago and just as historic. We don't have that problem anymore. We can mark that, but then advise people that lame delegation can mean so many other things. You need to be more specific when you use it in a current document. So
Thank you, Ed. Suzanne, I think that fits well with your proposal.
Yeah, because it's
Yeah.
not forward. Because frankly, it's not forward-looking. It's suggesting that we
Mhm.
sort of relegate the misunderstood past to historic status, and then that way we're not telling people what terms to use.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
if
but
something comes into common use, we can proceed accordingly.
we can reflect on how people should give directions how people should think about what they want to express and how to define that. Okay, anyone else? I don't see any comments in the Jabber room. Paul, please go ahead.
So a question then for me and Kazunori. We will wait for you chairs, but it sounds like Suzanne in specific to suggest something, and then it will be discussed, and you chairs, probably Suzanne in specific, will say, good, we're done. And then we will have that text and we will issue an 08. Is that the correct way? Or am I understanding what the way forward is at this point?
So, yeah. Well, maybe I should ask Suzanne, but that's my interpretation.
No,
Sorry.
that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Very good. We're happy to wait, and I think I do think this sounds like something where we will get somewhere. So thank you.
Yeah. So I really like this outcome because, well, we sketched a number of outcomes. This is not one we envisioned, but I like it quite a lot. I think it solves a lot of, or it solves, yeah, how do you say it? It meets, well, a lot of the discussion points we had on the mailing list and all the issues. So I'm quite happy with the outcome of this interim meeting. Someone else want to say before we wrap up? I think I don't want to necessarily wrap up, but I think we have come to a point of consensus how to go forward. So I want to give enough time for everyone to speak up, of course. But I think I don't see comments in the Jabber room, no raised hands. So I think we can wrap up, Suzanne.
That does sound. Dwayne, Paul Waters, how does that work for you guys? Go ahead, Dwayne.
I'm fine with this.
Okay. Paul, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm a little confused what this is at this point.
The proposed change to describe the various things that the term is used to, that the term has been used for, and call it historic. The only prescriptive suggestion would be that people say what they mean rather than use a term that is ambiguous.
Okay, yeah, that sounds fine.
Okay. Okay, I don't see any other raised hands. So, Benno, I think we've got.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you all for your participation and your contribution to the meeting. Yeah, we will wrap up. We will publish the notes in a week, something like that, and we'll also send an email to the mailing list with a small summary what we have discussed and the way forward, so that other people that could not attend the meeting are informed. And then
Yes.
I would like to
the
close.
other thing.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. The only other thing I will say is that since I did volunteer to write text and the editors are waiting on it, I will try to get that out in the next few days. I'm not entirely sure, but within the next week if all else fails.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Then I like to close this the interim meeting. thank you all, and well, I might see you in San Francisco at the IETF, either on site or remote. Thank you, and bye bye.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.